So for this incredible opportunity to talk about some of the business news that are relevant to our listeners and to our viewers. The first thing that I would want to talk about is this conference that has been happening in Dubai for the last week. So they call it COP28. So COP28 is a conference that has been taking place in Dubai for the past week. And there are three things that I would want to bring to the attention of our viewers about this conference, which we may or may not be aware of. The first thing is that in previous COP meetings, I think there's been a general agreement that the long-term goal is to keep the rise in temperatures to something like 1.5 degrees. If we look at the rate at which the world is emitting some of these dangerous gases into the environment, I think we are on course to exceed that target. So if we look at the current trend, I think temperatures are projected to increase by about 3 degrees. Tafadzwa, if you look at some of the extreme weather that we've had, for example, in the Western Cape, we have had significant floods which have impacted on agricultural harvest. Those extreme weather events have happened on the back of more than 1.5 degrees rise in temperatures. So a 3 degree increase in temperature will be catastrophic for the whole world. I was listening to one speaker at the COP conference, and they did indicate that if the temperatures rise by about 4 degrees, then you will start having a situation where some of the coastlines will actually disappear. If you think about Dubai, for some of you who've been to Dubai, if temperatures were to rise about 4 degrees, then you'll see some of those buildings in Dubai going underwater. So it's an important conversation that is going on at the world at the moment. The second thing that I would want to say with regard to that COP28 conference is how everyone in the world is agreed that the rich nations should actually pay the cost for climate change. And so, one of the things that we're going to see in terms of business trends for 2024 and even going beyond is how much money will be made available, particularly for sustainable initiatives. So, if you're a business person, I think we should be thinking about what it is that we can do to have access to some of these funds that are being set up to finance sustainable initiatives, business initiatives. And it's something that I would want to elaborate on going forward. The other thing that I got to learn at the COP4 conference is that for all the countries that we have in Africa, I think we account for something like less than 3% of the emissions in the whole world. So that's been interesting to me that, yes, everyone is talking about climate change, but Africa is not really a significant contributor, to that problem. But regardless of that fact, most of what will happen in the next few years will center around sustainability issues and sustainability conversations. And it's a conversation that I would want to elaborate on as we talk about business trends. So the first piece of news is COP28, happened, and there were significant things. The second piece of business news that I would want to bring to the attention of our viewers and our listeners is the news that also came out 2 days ago about how the South African economy is performing. So we had a contraction in GDP in South Africa of about 0.2%. That is looking at the period between July and September. This is on the back of 2 quarters of growth. So the question that people are asking now is the South African economy headed for recession? Yesterday, we had a bank, Absa Bank, giving an indication that the rate of default in terms of loans is actually going up. So in my view, the next few months in terms of the performance of the South African economy is going to be, they're going to be very critical. Last week, I did give an indication that some companies have already, filed for, retrenchments of employees. And the commentary that I gave, them. When I went into the GDP numbers, I think one of the things that interested me is that of the 0.2% contraction in the economy, one of the significant contributors to that was a 9.6 contraction in agriculture. So agriculture going forward is an area that we need to be, looking at. Obviously, the 9.6 contraction in agriculture was as a result of the avian flu disaster that we experienced in South Africa, and also the droughts that were experienced. I mean, the floods that were experienced in in the Western Cape. I was talking to an agriculturalist today in a breakfast meeting, and they drew attention to the El Nino effect, where they were actually expressing concern about the rainfall that has been received to date. And they attributed the low rainfall to the El Nino effect. So the El Nino effect, which is going to contribute to drought, going forward, is a conversation that people are going to have going forward, particularly in the agricultural sector. Another piece of business news that I would want to bring to our attention is a report that came out in South Africa, again 2 days ago. And it's basically, let's just call it a water quality report. It's a report that spoke about the quality of water in South Africa. And there are three things that interested me in that report. The first thing is that 46% of all water in South Africa pose a risk in terms of health issues to South Africans. Here we are talking about bacteria in the water. We are talking about pathogens in the water. So if you were to think about it, 46% of all water sources in South Africa are carrying that risk. The second thing that caught my attention in that business, news, is that 2/3 of all, wastewater purification plants are at the risk of breakdown. So we're talking about 67% of all these plants that purify, water. And I don't think there is an investment that has been set aside to make sure that should those water plants break down, they can be fixed. So, and the third piece of insight from that report is that 47% of all water that is purified is actually lost to a number of things. So it's not available for consumption. So it means that of all the water that is being purified, 47% is actually being lost to either illegal water connection, to evaporation, or just being lost to water leaks and what have you. Look, when we give these pieces of business updates, I think for a clever business person, you are seeing opportunities in terms of where to drive your business. You are also seeing emerging trends. And one of the trends that I would want to talk about, especially in the segment on business trends for 2024 and going beyond, is that water issues are going to be a problem going forward. So if you have had countries fighting over something, I think in the next few years, countries are going to be fighting over water, because there is definitely going to be a shortage of water, probably not immediately, but in the long term. And so as clever business people, as clever human beings, I think we need to position ourselves so that if that is going to happen in the future, then we are well positioned to capitalize on the trends, and we're not going to be, affected. A day ago, I think we received a report from the EU that people in the European Parliament have reached an agreement in terms of a law that will regulate artificial intelligence. So we have been talking about artificial intelligence in these shows for quite some time, but I think what we are seeing is regulators moving in swiftly to provide guidelines on how artificial intelligence should be used going forward. Obviously, it's all an attempt to protect industry from an abuse of the use of artificial intelligence. Because you know how it happens with some of these groundbreaking technologies. Whilst the intent is good, there may be people who may use some of these technologies to do harm to human beings. And some of you might have picked that one of the companies that is very progressive and has been successful in artificial intelligence, and also it's the company that gave us ChatGPT. They fired their CEO about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and that has been a huge, issue of discussion. And one of the reasons why the CEO was fired is because he was not honest about how AI was going to be deployed in a responsible, manner. So they fired the CEO. Everyone went up in arms when he was fired, including the employees, and they had to reinstate the guy, after quite a lot of pressure. And my view is that the board, took the right decision to be concerned about the negative impact of the deployment of AI technologies. But as it turns out, the board instead was asked to go after an uproar from investors, from employees, and from everyone who's concerned. In South Africa, in this week, we also had the National, Council of Provinces, which is an arm of parliament. In South Africa, parliament has got two houses. So we've got, the parliament that we know about, and then we've got the National Council of Provinces. So they actually approved the National Health Insurance Bill, which will give effect to a national health insurance scheme in South Africa. And this is all an attempt to ensure that everyone has got universal access to health. When I followed the discussions, whilst the intent is good to ensure that there is universal health care, it always boils down to how the government is going to be effective in implementing some of these, programs. I've got no confidence in the government implementing such a huge scheme. And many people are even raising concern about who is going to fund this national health insurance. So while the idea is good, I think implementation is going to be, to be an issue. So let me stop there, Tafadzwa. But what I wanted to do in this update on business news is to bring out those business news, particularly that are relevant when it comes to discussing the business trends for 2024, Tafadzwa.
Thank you very much for the news update. I was listening to a speaker who was saying, you cannot go to a future that you have not spoken to. So I believe if we know the trends, we can speak to our 2024, or even speak what we would want to happen, and for us to achieve our goals as entrepreneurs. And today we are talking about business trends for 2024. Why is an understanding of trends important for business and for everyone in general, Themba?
When we are planning in business, we do what we call an environmental scan. In that environmental scan, we look at trends that are emerging in the environment. And those trends could be in the external environment and also in the internal environment. So a discussion of business trends is very important because it helps businesses to plan for the future, because you don't want to be going against a trend. So the important insight here is that when you reflect on the trend, You also reflect on how do we need to respond as a business? What can we do to capitalize on those trends? Because as a business, you don't want to be found on the wrong side of a particular trend, Tafadzwa. We've always emphasized in these discussions that you cannot work yourself against a trend. You have to cooperate with a trend. And some of these trends actually have got strong signals. In other words, these are trends that have been developing over a number of years. And I think in 2024, we're going to see an accelerated imaging of some of these trends. So one of the reasons why we must be mindful of trends is for planning purposes and for positioning our businesses to benefit, from trends. Trends are not only important for businesses; they are also important for all of us, particularly as professionals. So again, at a professional level, you might be an employee in a particular business. An understanding of trends will also help you to position yourself for career progress. And I will talk about some of those trends and how we can capitalize on them. But the long and short of it, Tafadzwa, is that we need to understand trends so that we can plan. The year will be beginning in a few weeks, and by the time that the year begins, we should have had our plan all drawn up and ready to execute on the plan in the new year.
We need to know the trends so that we can plan and position ourselves. Last week and earlier today, you spoke about the AI. I was just reading somewhere where they were saying Accenture is joining Unilever, the consumer goods multinational, whose 400 plus brands are used by 3.4 billion people every day as part of a strategic initiative to leverage Unilever AI research and implementation of technologies that enhance productivity, that drive efficiencies and accelerate disruptive and AI-powered innovations at scale. We actually see that some big organizations are investing lots of money towards the AI. What are the top 5 trends that we can expect in 2024?
You're talking about AI there, Tafadzwa. In the past few weeks, I've been going through an AI course just to learn about this technology, about AI, what it's all about. So one of the things that I would want to recommend to our viewers and our listeners is that educate yourself about AI, because this is one of our top trends that we are predicting in 2024. So your question was, what are my top 5 business trends for 2024? Let me just give you the list of my top 5 business trends, and then I will briefly elaborate on each of them. So the first trend is what we are talking about, the use of generative AI. I think the use of generative AI will accelerate in 2024. There is no doubt in my mind that that is going to be the case. When we talk about generative AI, we're talking about a type of artificial intelligence technology that produces various types of content, including text, audio. And an example of generative AI is ChatGPT. So using generative AI, you can quickly generate content. So Tafadzwa, I know you are a writer. I don't know how long it took you to write your books, particularly your latest book. But what we are going to see, especially with the assistance of AI, is a situation where a writer can write a whole book, say of 200 pages in one day. So that will accelerate our way to be writers. I'm just giving that as an example. In my business, we've used generative AI for presentation. It used to take me 3 days to do a very good presentation to a client. But now, because of generative AI, I can do a presentation in 10 minutes. So there is quite a lot of productivity, there. So the use of generative AI, that's our top trend. The second, top trend that we are predicting is the preference by customers for sustainable businesses. We've been talking about this COP28 conference and conference that happened in Dubai and some of the resolutions that were raised there. I think in 2024, businesses should think quite seriously about their strategy towards sustainability. Many businesses have begun to do that, particularly your large businesses. So they've developed, what are called ESG policies. I deal with banks, and I know most of my clients have got ESG policies. I think in 2024, we're going to see even small businesses thinking about sustainability issues as far as small businesses are concerned. And I will talk about that, just now. The third trend that we are seeing, particularly in South Africa and even globally, is the talk of accelerating diversity and inclusivity as far as employees are concerned. I did speak about this, Tafadzwa, when I spoke about how businesses are promoting even women in positions of authority, and how businesses are being deliberate in making sure that our our workforce is as inclusive as possible. I think in 2024, we're going to see an acceleration of diversity practices in businesses, and that's a good trend, there. We've begun to see this trend in procurement, particularly in South Africa. The way government procures in South Africa, they use either an 80-20 system, where 80% of the points are given to functionality issues. Is your product fit for purpose, or is your service fit for purpose? Does it comply with the functionality requirements of procurement? And the 20% is for price, where they look at transformation issues, including gender and diversity. And one of the things that we started seeing this year is how scores have been increased to promote women businesses, to promote youth businesses, and other marginalized, previously marginalized sections of society. And I think that trend will accelerate, going forward. So we're not just talking about taking the girl child to work. We are actually talking about embedding gender and diversity in business practices, in practical ways. The third trend is embedding resilience in business processes. So we are all agreed, Tafadzwa, that we are operating in a very, very uncertain environment. And in this uncertain environment, anything can happen. And when we talk about anything can happen, we're talking from extreme weather to cybersecurity events to social unrest. These are all things that can impact on our business processes, including wars for that matter. So one of the things that people are talking about is how can we build resilience in business processes so that if we encounter an event such as a flood, we are able to bounce back and continue with business processes so that we can deliver to our customers. And COVID was a huge learning point for businesses in terms of embedding resilience. And in this past year, I have seen businesses embedding succession planning as part of embedding resilience in business processes. So businesses are talking about succession planning so that if a critical person is hit by the proverbial bus, at least the business does not come to a halt. It's able to, to continue there. And it boils down to crafting a business continuity plan, but also testing that business continuity plan so that you can do sort of a crisis simulation and prepare your employees for an eventuality where they may encounter some of these events that we are talking about. The fifth business trend that we are predicting for 2024 is what I call the customer experience revolution, because it's all about customers. We are delivering our services to customers, and at any point in the business value chain, we should be looking at improving the customer experience. I know of many businesses that have got customer experience managers, and so I think going forward, businesses have to do more to delight the customers. And even when we talk about delighting the customers, we also need to talk about personalization at scale. Tafadzwa, I think you would have seen that business models these days are geared towards personalizing the service or personalizing the product to particular customer segments or particular customer groups. I think in 2024, personalization will actually increase, because that is what customers are actually demanding from us. So our top 5 business trends, just to go over them again, is the use of generative AI. It's the use of, it's the preference by consumers for sustainable businesses. It's actually diversity and inclusivity in the workplace, and it's resilience practices, and the customer experience revolution. Let me just say, a few things about these, five trends. But before I say those few things, let me just say this to our customers, to our viewers and our listeners, Tafadzwa. Just before we go into the new year, we're going to give our viewers and our listeners what we call our house view in terms of important macroeconomics indicators. So today's discussion is not about our house view, where we talk about where we think interest rates will be, where we think the stock market will, how the stock market will perform in 2024. We're not talking about that today. We're going to give our house view of macroeconomic indicators in our show just before 2024. But I think before we even give that house view, most of our listeners and our viewers would know how we think about 2024. We think interest rates will still be high. So we are in this period where interest rates will be higher for a longer time. So you can gear yourself for 2024 for higher interest rates. But just, so that you know that we're going to give that house view in a few weeks' time. But today we're just discussing, the trends. Trend number 1, the use of generative AI. It's not just about understanding the trend. It's what we are going to do about that trend. So here are my 3 action points, particularly for small business people. Number 1, attend a course on AI. Educate yourself on AI. It's very, very important. I know some small business people went to school a long time ago, but in this uncertain world where things are moving very fast, you need to educate yourself on some of these important trends. So that should be your action number 1 for 2024. Action number 2, consider how AI will be deployed in your business. You cannot ignore AI. I think many progressive businesses will have to look at how they are going to deploy AI in their businesses. In other words, have an AI strategy. That's very, very, important. That AI strategy should mainly focus around productivity, how you can do certain tasks much more effectively. In our small businesses, we have begun to deploy AI in digital marketing. So we used to employ a whole marketing team to send emails, and people will be involved in this manual activity of sending emails. But now we're deploying AI to automatically send emails to our targeted, group. That's a huge saving there. We are also deploying generative AI to do presentations, to generate content for what we need to do, because we are a training business and sometimes we need to come up with training manual. And we have found AI to be very, very useful in terms of generating the content that we have, where it used to take us 3 days to put together a training manual. Now it's just taking us a matter of hours, there. So those are just the examples of areas where we've begun to deploy AI. Obviously, we're still continuing to explore other ways in which we can deploy AI in our businesses. And I think it's something that we need to be, thinking about in our businesses, again, as far as AI, is concerned, particularly in the area of marketing, in the areas of generating content. These are obvious areas where we can generate, we can deploy AI technologies in our business. The third thing is that we need to be on the right side of the law. Remember, I spoke about how legislators are beginning to craft laws around AIs. Granted, some of these laws will only come in 2025. For example, the EU legislation that I spoke about, it's scheduled to, come in 2025, only. But I think it's something that we need to be, prepared, for, so that we can use AI in very responsible ways. As far as the second trend is concerned around sustainable businesses, I did mention that customers will prefer sustainable, businesses. I think there are three action points that I would want to propose to small businesses. The first, action point, depending on the size of our business, we should have an ESG policy or an ESG strategy. I cannot tell you how many times I have had to prepare a supplier registration form where I would want my business to be registered on somebody's database so that I can do business with them. And one of the questions that they've asked me there is that, do you have an ESG policy in place? So the expectation is that even small businesses should have a policy that deals with sustainability, issues. The second action point there that I would want to, us to think about is obviously to educate ourselves around sustainability issues. So there's no harm in taking a course as a small business person, as a professional in ESG, and see how ESG will impact everything that we do. For example, I work with banks, and banks are involved in lending to small businesses. I can tell you now, most banks have begun to incorporate ESG issues in their credit assessments. In other words, those companies that have a favorable score in ESG actually receive favorable credit assessments. So it's something that we need to think about. The third action point is an ESG strategy. There are funds that will be released in the not so distant future, and some of them have begun to be released in terms of sustainability financing. And that's an area that we can benefit from, where we think about what is it that we can do to make use of, to qualify for this sustainable finance. Because this sustainable finance, as it turns out, even if it's a loan, the interest rates are very low. In other words, it's concessionary funding. So it's something that we would want to think about. The third trend on diversity and inclusivity. Again, I've got, action points there, two action points. The first action point is we need to be diverse in our hiring. So we need to think about what it is that we can do to increase the percentages of young people that we are hiring, the percentages of disabled people, the percentages of women even women in um, in positions of authority in business. The second thing is, given all of these business trends, we need to rethink our hiring practices. And here, in terms of rethinking how we hire people, I would want to just highlight, something that I have come across, and this would be particularly interesting to those that are joining the work, the workplace. Maybe you're coming from school and you'll be joining the workplace, next year. um, Companies are changing their hiring practices. It used to be the case that there was preference given on things such as age, things such as your educational qualifications. I don't think going forward, people are going to be placing much emphasis on your degree and what you studied, but people are going to be placing emphasis on competencies of the future, because there are certain competencies that are needed in the future. Competencies such as having analytical skills, competencies such as being able to analyze data. I think data analytics is something that is going to be in demand going forward, because one of the trends that is beginning is a trend of the data economy, how companies can process all of this data, and some of the data is even being processed using AI. AI is enabling us to process quite a lot of data. So there is no harm in getting those data analytics skills, particularly programming skills, Python programming. You might have had a degree in HR, a degree in whatever field, but if you are going to the job market, just getting yourself educated and enrolling for a course in that particular area, I think will put you ahead of your peers and will make you more attractive to those people that are hiring. The other trend as far as hiring, I'm talking about diversity and inclusivity. The other trend that is emerging, and I think it's a trend that we are going to see on the job market, is preference being given to all of to those skills that I would call transportable skills. Remember what we spoke about Tafadzwa last week. I spoke about retrenchments and the increased number of retrenchments that we have seen, particularly in this quarter. In the world that has gone by, there has been a focus on technical skills and skills that are not transportable across industries. But I think going forward, we are going to see a preference being given to those candidates that have got transportable skills. In other words, skills that you can use across industries. So as we develop ourselves as professionals, let's also develop ourselves in those transportable skills. Here I'm talking about skills such as soft skills, and an example of soft skills is communication skills. It's about emotional intelligence. Those are skills that have not received quite a lot of emphasis and a lot of discussion in the past. But I think going forward, because some of these technologies take care of the technical skills that we used to have. It doesn't mean that we are not going to be employable. It just means that those that are involved in hiring will give emphasis to other areas, such as particularly soft skills. So we need to train ourselves more in terms of soft skills, negotiation, because remember, AI will not necessarily enable us to do those things. AI will enable us to carry out repetitive tasks with much productivity, but AI will not replace human beings in terms of those transportable skills, such as negotiation skills, communication skills, and emotional intelligence. So if you haven't been trained or attended a course on those areas, you would want to put yourself ahead of your peers by training yourself in those things. We also spoke about resilience. it might be a good thing for businesses to be testing their business continuity plans, because we don't know what disaster will hit us, going forward. We also spoke about personalization at scale, where we need to personalize our services to customers, to segment our customer bases, because customers are demanding and they will be very demanding going forward. So we need to scale up our personalization of our goods and services, however that will appear, like in our businesses. So let me stop there. I've given you my top 5 trends in business trends for 2024.
Thank you, Themba, for the comprehensive information on the trends. I've got a question here to maybe someone who is not well knowledgeable about some of these things. What are ESG policies? To maybe explaining to someone in very simple terms.
In very simple terms, ESG is an acronym. The E stands for environment. So there you are talking about environmental issues. The S stands for social issues. So social issues such as diversity of our workforce, that's a social issue. Social issues such as fair trade practices and not oppressing people. And here we're talking about child labor, as well. And then the G stands for governance. So when we are talking about an ESG policy, it's a policy that deals with sustainability issues, particularly those 3 categories of sustainability issues. We're talking about environmental issues. So when we talk about environmental issues, the thing that gets talked about most of the time is emissions. And I think it's time that we reflect on, what we are emitting into the environment and contribute towards reduced emissions. So here is the thing, Tafadzwa. We are talking about businesses. If you look at car manufacturing companies, Tafadzwa, they have embedded ESG. And now people are talking about EVs. EV stands for electronic vehicles. So there is no question that most of the vehicles that we are going to have in 10 years' time, in fact, in 5 years, 10 years' time, will be powered by electric batteries. So even in mining, things are shifting towards lithium, because lithium is an ingredient in producing some of these batteries. So in case you are thinking about businesses for the future, I think this is something that we need to be thinking about, and how we position ourselves. I've been having conversations with mining houses, and some of them are slowly steering their businesses towards lithium production. So just to answer the question, ESG stands for environment, social, and governance issues in a business.
You also mentioned that I think this one you have answered, where you were mentioning that maybe as a writer, I should consider AI, because my question was going to be on the creativity, because when you're writing something that's not like repetitive, you need some creativity, and probably you can't trust a robot to be as creative or to read your mind. So I think you explained it when you say the AI does the repetitive, like doing a manual. I think some of the things they don't need creativity or a training program. So I think that one has been answered. I've been listening to a number of speakers, and they were talking about 2024 being a difficult year financially. And they're talking about resilience, because normally people wait for 31 December to hear how the year is going to be. but I've heard a number of speakers saying financially things are going to be very rough 2024. You was talking about resilience. How can our viewers prepare themselves for the tough financial year ahead? If the speakers are on the point, I think you've mentioned that in passing as well, that things are likely to be tough 2024 financially.
Very, very good, Tafadzwa. So you've raised two issues there. The first issue that you raised is about the use of AI in producing content. And I gave an example of writers. AI is getting cleverer, Tafadzwa. I don't know if you have subscribed to, you've got a Chat GPT account. Do you have a Chat GPT account, Tafadzwa?
I'm sure from my question, I still trust myself more to do the writing. So I don't
All right. No, that's fine. Here is an action point because I believe in being actionable, actioning things after such presentation. Go do yourself a favor. Open a Chat GPT account. There is a free version. I think Chat GPT 3.0 is actually a free version. So these versions, these artificial intelligence, technologies are getting cleverer and cleverer by the day. They are slowly mimicking, human beings, even in terms of creativity, Tafadzwa. So let me just demonstrate to you the use of Chat GPT. You can say to Chat GPT, write me a um, a marketing letter to my customer, and my customer is this customer segment, and Chat GPT can do that quite easily within minutes. So there is a paid version for Chat GPT. I think Chat GPT 4.0, and even they are now on 5.0. It's becoming more intelligent. So you're talking to, I've spoken about routine tasks, but let's just bear in mind that these technologies are becoming much more creative. I would want writers to use, AI. And the way you use AI is initially to generate the content. Because remember, writers do research. And the research part of it, you can actually rely on artificial intelligence to do that. And then after the application has generated the research, you then apply your mind on, being creative on content that has been generated. And it just helps you to produce the book in a shorter time period. So that's the one thing that I would want to do. If you are that kind of writer that is stuck in the past, that says, I believe in myself, I will not use AI, then you are at a competitive disadvantage. That's the long and short of it. And that's what I would want to make clear to our, don't get, stuck. This AI is one of the most important technological revolution that we will ever see in our lifetime. It's not just a trend that we are predicting for 2024, but it's a revolution that we have never seen in our lifetime. And we can't resist this revolution, Tafadzwa. Then your second point was about 2024 and how 2024 might potentially be a difficult year. I think it varies from country to country. So let me give you an example. If I look at a country like Malawi, 2024 will continue to be a difficult year, particularly for the consumer, because the economy started being difficult even in 2023, and it will continue like that. If I look at a country like Zimbabwe, some of our listeners may be in Zimbabwe. 2024 will be a highly difficult year. Forget about everything that we're talking about. It's just because of wrong government policies and the stance that the government has taken there. So 2024, in my mind, if you're living in Zimbabwe, definitely a very, very difficult year. If you are living in South Africa, it's also going to be a difficult year, but there are going to be opportunities. And one of the reasons why it will potentially be difficult is that interest rates are going to be high still in 2024. So it doesn't matter which part of the world you are in. the projection is that these interest rates are going to be higher for a longer time. And we'll elaborate on this point in our last show, Tafadzwa, when we actually give our house view to our viewers and our listeners. Then you asked me, Tafadzwa, the question, what should our viewers do? Because 2024 is going to be a difficult year. Two things that I would want to put on the table here. Number one, you must have emergency funds. We've been advocating for 3 months emergency fund. You cannot run with no reserves going into 2024. It's not a wise thing to do. Number two, have an exit strategy. You might be employed in a very cush job, but we are getting to that time when you can be retrenched. And this retrenchment that might come your way is not necessarily because you're not performing, but it's because companies are finding more productive ways to do things and that companies are experiencing competitive pressures. Remember, everyone else is using AI. And the good thing about AI is that it lowers the cost of production and it lowers the cost of doing business. And because it lowers the cost of doing business, we're going to see, competition in many ways. So there is always the possibility that for certain tasks where you used to have people, you're going to have less and less people. I was in Dubai, months, let's just say 4 or 5 months ago. And one of the things that they are talking about, Tafadzwa, because of the use of this technology, they were actually saying you can leave your hotel room and be able to get on a plane, say you're leaving Dubai in 30 minutes. In other words, they are doing away with queues, where I know the process began earlier on. But you see, this thing of stamping your passport and putting a stamp on your passport, that is going to be something of the past, because we're going to, and they were even piloting technology where your face could be scanned. And that's it. They allow you to exit the country just by scanning your face. There is no. So all of these people that are stamping passports and all of these people that are collecting luggage, they're going to be retrenched. And it's the unfortunate thing that is going to happen. And it's a trend. So have an exit strategy. And when I talk about an exit strategy, just know that as an employee, you are always at the risk of losing your job. It doesn't matter how qualified you are. And I can give so many examples, Tafadzwa, on that.
Thank you about that. I think I will check the Chat GPT 5.0. I hope they will also have one that edits. And that one I'll need, where the robot can just edit my work as long as it's not, the robot is not changing the context of my work. I think that one I'll pay for. Apart from
just before you go on, Tafadzwa, just before you go on, they even have AI to translate into various languages. So we used to pay translators, we used to pay editors, and these things can do these tasks quite efficient. So it's not only editing apps that they have, but it's translation apps, because some authors would need their material translated in other languages.
Thank you for that. I'll definitely do a research on that. Apart from those top 5 trends, are there any other trends that you would want to share?
I think the major trends I've already shared. Some of them I've spoken about. This thing about water it will always be a theme going forward, Tafadzwa. Water is always going to be a theme. And let me give you examples of how water will continue to be a conversation. Number one, if you are in agriculture, you have to think about doing irrigation. I think many farmers are beginning to realize that you cannot rely on rainfall for you to do meaningful agriculture. You have to look at irrigation and sustainable ways of using water to irrigate your plants. So water will always be, a conversation going forward. And we must think about recycling. The recycling economy presents a huge opportunity, for us in terms of how water can be recycled. I think people are talking about, water being recycled in the house and later on even being used for watering plants. You can't just use water from the tap to water plants. It has to be recycled water. So I'm imagining going forward a number of green businesses coming up. So if you've got an idea on how we can recycle things, plastic is going to be an issue going forward. And people will need to think about sustainable ways of recycling, plastic, recycling water. And so I'm giving you business ideas here, Tafadzwa, technology that will help us to do recycling. The other trend that I would want to highlight, and I've heard many people talking about it in South Africa, and this might interest you, Tafadzwa, is the 4-day work week. I know of companies, the work day currently is 5 days. People go to work for 5 days, and then you've got 2 days, for the weekend. There are many companies that have piloted the idea of a 4-day week. We're talking about people working for 4 days without compromising on productivity. And many companies that have piloted this idea have actually come back and said it's a wonderful idea. Why is it wonderful? Because it enables people to spend one more day with their families. And it embeds this work-life balance, idea that people have been talking about. I think it's a trend that will gather momentum going into 2023. We have to look at, because remember, technology is enabling us to be more productive. And therefore, if we are more productive, we can do more things in 4 days than we used to do in 5 days. And that's the idea. So why work for 5 days when we can work for 4 days? And so remote and distributed work is continuing to be a trend. Remote working started after COVID, during COVID, and it's something that's going to be a trend going forward. We are going to see situations where you are in a country like South Africa and delivering services to companies in the UK, companies in America. You don't have to go there because of remote and distributed work. That's a trend, a global trend that emerged and is going to continue. I've spoken about the data economy, Tafadzwa. The data economy is going to gather momentum. And even systems that we're going to implement in businesses should be systems that are able to analyze data and get insights in terms of the data. We have seen the emerging of professions such as data scientists. So in case you are wondering about some of the professions for the future, data scientists, I'm working with an organization that is implementing a data lake where you put this data in on a platform, and every other system will then use that platform for the reporting that they do. So how we use data in an organization and what insights we get from that data, it's going to be a trend going forward. So I think those are the other things that I would want to just emphasize, Tafadzwa.
Thank you for those trends. What would be your closing remarks and where can people find you?
My closing remarks is that 2024 is going to be an exciting year, but it's also going to be an uncertain year. It's going to be a challenging year, even in terms of business. I'm hopeful that for most of our viewers and our listeners, that we are going to prepare ourselves for a great 2024. There are so many headwinds. Headwinds are those things that may stand as obstacles. There are also tailwinds. Tailwinds are those things that are going to help us to reach our destination. We cannot ignore AI. We need to be thinking about AI. We cannot ignore the green economy. This is something that is come to stay. We cannot, ignore diversity and inclusivity in the workplace. I think that's something that has also, come to stay. We cannot ignore disruption that is happening in businesses to such an extent that customers are becoming to be, demanding. As business people, we need to continually look at our business models and sharpening our business model to enhance the customer experience and the customer journey. So if you are a business, I would want to introduce this terminology, customer journey. Just plot on a chart what the customer journey is for your business and try to increase the delight of the customer at every touch point of that customer journey. Because sometimes we never really think about the customer journey. When we're talking about the customer journey, we're talking about what does your customer experience from the time that they access your website? Are your things accessible to the customers? Because remember, going forward, people are going to be impatient. They don't have time to look for things. In fact, we are existing in an economy where even our customers are lazy. If you cannot produce something for them in 5 seconds, they move on to your competitor because they don't have the time to be looking for information that is hidden. You have to give them on a platter, on a silver platter. And it's those businesses that think about the customer journey and how they can delight their customers that are going to be successful in 2024 going forward. Those would be my closing remarks, Tafadzwa. The easiest way for people to contact me, should you need more information about trends, because that's something that we focus on. Today, we've been focusing on business trends, but we also do quite a lot of work in terms of trends for the personal consumer, even trends as far as religious matters are concerned. It's work that we do for other organizations. So if we're not going to do a show on that, obviously, but should you want more information, just contact me via LinkedIn, and we'll be able to share with you some of the insights that we have gathered by just watching some of the trends that are developing. And these are trends that have got a very strong signal, Tafadzwa.
Thank you very much, Themba, and thank you for the contribution. We appreciate your support and all the knowledge, and we hope our listeners are implementing that which they are learning, and they're becoming better, because that's our desire, that we all grow together and we become better as we pursue and achieve all our dreams. To contact us, you can contact us on our WhatsApp that's on the page, or you can write us to Tafadzwa at tafadzwamazibukospeaks.co.za. You can also visit our website, www.tafadzwamazibukospeaks.co.za. We also have a YouTube channel which you can subscribe to, The Dream That Was Worth Fighting For. And we still have our Dreamers Daily Planner 2024 for those in Zimbabwe. You can get them at Crystal Gates Bookshop, or you can contact us. We appreciate you and thank you for being with us this Saturday afternoon. We wish you a great weekend ahead. Until we meet next time. Cheers.